will be our first speaker in this series of seminar. So Jianhong is internationally recognized experts and outstanding researchers, and he has many interests. Among many others, I can mention the qualitative theory of nonlinear systems with applications to population dynamics and infectious disease transmission dynamics. He is a senior Canada Research Chair in Industrial and Vaccine Mathematics, Modeling and Manufacturing, and he has been leading the Canadian National COVID-19 Pandemic Rapid Response Modeling Task Force, commissioned by the Fields Institute. Now he's a member of the Ontario Provincial and of the Canadian National Modeling Expert Panels. So today we'll talk about the impact of non-pharmaceutical intervention and vaccination on shifting social contact patterns to alter epidemic trends in a disease outbreak. So please, Jianhong, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. First of all, I would like to really thank you for this opportunity to speak on your online seminars. And this particular honor given, this is, I think, pretty much the anniversary of your first reported cases in Italy. Just Dimitri just mentioned that in Canada, we created a seminar research group very similar to what you created now. Titled is COVID-19 Rapid Response Modeling Task Force in February of 2020. That's right before the outbreak took off in Canada. We have been going through a year of interactions with the public health decision making. And after a few weeks of months of effort trying to model the epidemiological process, we quickly realized that, especially when we're talking about reopening, recovery, that the social economic consideration is very important as well. So I want to congratulate you for realizing that. So your title of the working group has indeed including the social experts in the mathematical modeling effort. So it's a very wise and strategic recognition of the complexity of the mathematical models. So what I'm trying to talk about is based on a series of studies conducted in our laboratory for industry applied mathematics. I think Andrea, Dimitri, you both delivered a number of distinction lectures and training courses for this group of students. So they are really putting this in action. A most significant partner is actually a PhD student, Dr. McCarthy. He is really the main architecture for this contact mixing identification methodology. And within this team, we have 4 postdocs. 2 of them have left by the end of last year, and they went back to China and to Korea, taking faculty positions in some of the National Institute of Mathematics Science and in Xian-Jiaotong universities. And there are 2 other PhD students still with us, postdocs with us. One of you, I think you can recognize, the Francesca Scaraba. She was trained originally in numerical bifurcation analysis in Udiner and renewal equations in Helsinki. And she quickly became really the brain in our entire lab of building credible mathematical models and to inform decision making. I have to tell you that the federal government, Public Health Agency of Canada, did offer her a position without she being applied. However, I was surprised that Francesca have a European heart. She feels she wants to go back to Europe. And the first time, I think, a postdoc declined offer from federal agencies. And another significant postdoc is Nicola Bragazzi. He had a PhD degree in physics, MD in medical degree, and then certificate in public health. He is a real expert in bioinformatics. I just want to share the experience with your group, that I feel having an expert, especially in bioinformatics, really give us the updated information from vast amount of literatures, and he is really our star. The other members from the research team, faculty members in the stochastic optimization, in in-house modeling, in disaster and emergency management program. We have also two important collaborators, Dr. Muti, the director of Fields Institute, who is also chairing the Ontario province modeling consensus table. And Nick Ogden is the director of the science division of a federal public health agency. And both of them are the critical bridge between the modeling and the public health decision making. So this is the first time that in Canada, but I think it probably is in many other parts of the country, that modeling is directly translated quickly, and the recommendation from the modeling table, both in the provincial and the federal level, was directly communicated to the decision process. I want to emphasize one thing about talking about modeling COVID-19 in the country. And I feel this is almost impossible in Canada because the substantial spatial heterogeneity in terms of the outbreak, but more importantly in terms of intervention. This is partly because, not only because I have a huge demand, but because it's a federal structure. So all the decision making have been made by the province rather than by federal government. The federal government normally just issues the guideline, but it is the province that made decision on the interventions. So building a national model is relatively hard and might not be so relevant in this case. So we decide to focus specifically on the province of Ontario, that's the province I am with, and it is the largest province in the country. So this is the year time series of COVID-19 in the province of Ontario, starting from end of February and ended in this time series is up to date up to last week. So we have gone through two outbreaks. Starting in February, we had experienced exponential growth. This is roughly about 2 weeks behind Italy. So one of the study we did is really just monitor what Italy has achieved and using Italy as a reference case so that we can make real-time projections in terms of Ontario. And this first wave reached the peak by the middle of April and officially ended on May 16th is because the government decided to open the reopening, started the reopening process on May 16th. And so you can see that the reproduction number has been, the decline has been, in the first wave has been really, there is a long flat tail, and then you have seen some quiet activities in the summer, and then when the fall starts, the economy was started to reopen and the school started to reopen, you can see the epidemic pick up very quickly, lead to a second outbreak, and led to the province shutdown before the Christmas. So this is basically the epidemic curve. These are daily reported cases. So what we are trying to focus here is on the first wave. So we would like to develop a method that allow us to model the impact of all the non-pharmaceutical interventions on the social contact mixing. So we are going to model this and try to validate this using the data from beginning of February, end of February until remember May 19th. Remember 16th is the time really government has decided to reopen the economy. So what we would like to achieve is to try to define and identify the contact mixing according to different age groups. Those are age groups which are relevant to different interventions. So we would like to build the contact mixing in the workplace, in the household, in the school, and in the community. And would like to identify the contribution of the transmission in all of these settings to the overall incidence. And since this is age-specific transmission model, we hope we can also identify age-specific susceptibility to infections. So this is the goal of the first study in terms of effort to describe and quantify the shift of social contacting. So let me be more specific. So in Ontario, in the province of Ontario, we have gone through 4 different phases in the first outbreak. So the before March 14, and from the beginning of, from the end of February, when this became an issue in Ontario, it is the pre-pandemic phase 0. We will only have the monitoring travel advisories. To the second phase on March 14th, that's the beginning of the March break in Ontario schools. So the government decided to take the opportunity to close all the public school. And it was announced at the beginning for 2 weeks, but eventually it was closed for the whole semester and for the whole first outbreak. And by the end of the first week, the government realized that did not work, especially when we closed the school and the kids and the parents took the opportunity and went to the south, to the hot epidemic zone in USA, and they brought the cases back to Canada. So immediately, government realized that it is impossible to contain, and so we declared the state of emergency and implement certain physical distance measures and closing some of the community and recreational activities. And that was not enough. Very quickly, again, on March 24th, the government decided to close all non-essential working place until really May 16th, as I just mentioned. So it's a escalated, staged interventions, and those intervention changes very quickly. And that's the difficulty in terms of trying to identify the social contact mixing in such a situations. So what we're trying to do is we started with homogeneous model that really gave us the baseline, that gave us average number of the contacts, that gave us the average effectiveness of the quarantine and isolation and so on and so forth. So we started to build a homogeneous model, and then we expanded homogeneous model to account for the heterogeneity of contact by age groups. And the next step is really try to identify the social contact matrix representative of the social mixing in Ontario before the pandemic and try to identify some of the building blocks for general contact mixing so that we can simplify our parameter identification process because the data we have was and still limited. And we're using the building blocks as basic kind of basis for contact mixing in a changing environment. And then we try to using the available daily incidence data to capture the shift of social contact in different phases of the public health interventions. So those are our strategies, and I'm going to outline some of the major steps in those strategies. The first part is relatively straightforward for many of you. So we started with the standard extension of the SIR epidemiological model. So we consider, so we describe the disease progression in a particular age group in terms of from susceptible to exposed, and then to become infections but asymptomatic, or infections but symptomatic, and eventually recovered. We also incorporate the non-pharmaceutical interventions, in particular the quarantine. So some susceptible individuals who are believed to be exposed to the infections are quarantined and moved to the quarantine exposed category, and then you might conduct some testing for those group of people and also symptomatic infections, and then to identify, confirmed, and then removed from the transmission. So this is really a simple extension of the SERR model, but considering some of the interventions. This is homogeneous model within age group, and the next step is try to couple them through the contact mixing matrix. So in this case, our CIJ is really the number of contacts between the age group J with age group of I. And this one times the transmission probability per contact for the age group I. So if we can identify these parameters from the data, then this will give you a kind of relative susceptibility of the age group, and CIG, of course, it's a contact between two different age groups. So it's a couple system of the SER models coupled through age groups. The key is here we have 6 age groups, 6 age classes. We aggregate in terms of the age group that are relevant to interventions. So for age group from 0 to 5, those are infants. Those are relevant to stay home and to kindergarten. 6 to 13 are elementary school students. From 14 to 17 are from the primary school students. 18 to 24 or more of college and university students. 25 to 64 is more of the working class, and then 65 for the seniors. So those are relevant. This classification is important in terms of the evaluating social distance measure and eventually for reopening the economy. So the second part is try to now identify the social contact matrices in the province before the pandemic, and this was widely believed to have been done by in the two well-known papers, Masson and Duprin, both published in before the pandemic, 2008 and 2017. I know Duprin had the new papers last year for COVID-19. So they have done this for Canadian populations with age group divided into by 5-year intervals. So they have 16 age groups. And from that, they can also identify the contact mixing in the home, in the work, in the school, in the other locations. However, this is done in Canada. So there are many studies now in Canada just basically using that contact mixing, but we argue that this is not sufficient. And because the demographic structure in the province of Ontario, being the economic engine in the country, is different. So we have to conduct a serious transformations to transform this contact mixing matrix from what was done for Canada in the period before 2006 to the contact mixing in Ontario based on the demographic information in 2019. And remember that we want to take this consideration. We have to talk about the modified age group subdivision. We have only 6 age groups in mind, and we want to count for the specific age structure in Ontario, and we have to take consideration the mean connectivity in the province of Ontario and Canada. Remember, Canada is a huge land and with very different connectivities in from some of the coastal cities and some parallel provinces to more industrialized province. And we have to do that to make sure the reciprocity condition is always satisfied. So I will go very quickly about this mathematical part. And the analysis has been published. So you can go through these details. So as I mentioned that we have gone through a serious matrix transformation. The first one is to make sure always have this reciprocity condition satisfied. So this is done by really to normalize the total number of contact between 2 age groups normalized by the receiving age group of NI. So this is normalization to ensure that every stage the reciprocity condition is satisfied. And the second part is, again, we want to transfer from the reference matrix that was done in Canada to the matrix that we want to build for Ontario. So that, again, in terms has to be normalized by the age groups in different, in the countries, in the provinces, compared with the relevant information in the country. So we do have the relevant information for both Ontario and for Canada. And the next one is, again, so the original creation of the contact mixing matrix is in 16 age groups, but that's too big, and we don't have enough data to parameterize this. And on the other hand, what is more important are the stage that we just described. Those are relevant to intervention, relevant to reopening process. So this, you have to do certain bookkeeping practice to really assign the age groups properly, because there are some overlapping of the divisions. And finally, remember that the projection that was done in 2006. We have to really normalize the, we have to make the projection based on the population 2019 by considering the density of the population, the change of density of population. Again, this one was done through another transformation. So this can be systematically done. So this whole process can be duplicated, not necessarily for the province of Ontario, but can be done for other provinces and other places. So the final stage is really to try to capture the contact mixing change during different phases of interventions. So remember, we have 4 different phases, from phase 0 to phase 1 was school closure, phase 2 of state emergency, to phase 3 of closure of all non-essential workplace. So we assume that the contact mixing in each of the stage is relatively constant, except the last phase. The last phase has been time variant, because basically the epidemic went from still going up to going down. So this period, including the period where the reproduction number has, for example, has gone through above 1 to below 1. So this has to be time varying process. But overall, we consider 4 different phases. In each phase, the contact mixing is relatively constant except in this phase. Okay, so the idea is really, the question is how to construct those 4 the contact mixing in those 4 different phases. The first phase is the pre-pandemic. That's the one I just talked about it. You transfer this from the contact mixing from the whole country to Ontario, and then try to partition this in terms of age groups and partition this in different settings: the home, the workplace, the community, and the school. Then we were we're trying to model the change or shift by simply change of these block matrices. So those block matrices are the basis, they are fixed. It's only now, for example, in the first one, the school is closed. So there will be no more contact. There is no more contact in the school, and the contact from the school now is shifted from the school to the home, to the community, and shifted from the school to the home. And of course, there's no transform of the activity from school to the workplace. And then the second phase is more of social distancing, advisory, and closing some of the community activities. So remember, there's no more school or activity system disappear. So now you have activities, contact mixing change in the community and potentially in the home, but not really in the workplace. And then the third phase, you close the non-essential workplace. So this matrix has been modified, and there are some shifts from the workplace to the community and to the home. And how much of this shift of the activities from, for example, from the home to the school and to the community is going to be a parameter that we need to be identified. Remember, we need to also talk about certain time varying process here. So with that, so instead of having to identify each entry of the contact mix, now we are simplifying the issue to really identify the transfer of the activities from one setting to another. So the number of parameters have been significantly reduced to 1, 2, 3, 4, and to 8 parameters, in addition to some of the critical information about the quarantine, isolation, contact tracing, and age-specific susceptibility. So what is available is, this is in the first time in the history of Ontario that the daily incidence data by age was made available to some mathematical models in real time. So we have access to the, for example, we can compile 6 lists of time series. I mean, 6 lists means not only the time series of incidents from the beginning to the end, but also in terms of ages. And remember, this is between February 26 to May 16 of the year 2020. And so we have relatively larger time series and in a long time interval. And the key is really try to do a single fitting procedure to estimate all the age-dependent, age-independent model parameters. And this is possible. And the data feeding is a painful process. Anybody has been doing this is painful process, but it's possible, and data feeding is remarkably good. And again, we use homogeneous model to estimate some baseline, and that would give us a initial guessing and the simplify, save lots of computation times. So is one of the validation of the data feeding process. So he is the calculated reproduction, effective reproduction number in different phases. And this is the estimated time when the reproduction number crosses into unity 1, and it's about April the 10th. So our group is the first group to predict to have correctly predict the peak time value for the first wave in the end of March. And remember, the peak time in the first wave is about April the 16th. Now, what now helps is really to allow us to identify the contact mixing in different age groups, but also contact mixing in the different settings. So you can see those are the heat map, the contact mixing in 4 different phases, from phase 0 to phase 1. You can see it's really just only the activities with the younger age group have been reduced due to the school closure. And then you can see some of the reduction of the contact mixing across almost age group, except really in those groups relevant to the working place. And of course, in the last phase, when the working place is closed, you can see a substantial reduction of contact mixing from the phase 0 to phase 4. So that really give you the estimation of the effectiveness of non-pharmaceutical interventions reflected in different settings. And what the important part is really the shift, of course, of the contact mixing from the school, from the workplace to the community, and especially to the household. And this is not a surprise. So this really gives us the main contact in terms of school, in terms of the community, in terms of in terms of the home, in terms of the workplace. No, in terms of the workplace, in terms of the household. So you can see the increasing of the contact in the household, and not much essential change of contact in the community, and of course the elimination of contact in the school after phase 1 and phase 2. So this can be quantified, and you can also really estimate the infection required in Ontario according to different settings. Again, the infection in the school is basically 0, and the second level of contribution is from the community, and then really from the household, and then from the working place, which is not that so visible here, but then in the household. All right, so you can have more resolution, and what is also important is this process allows us also to identify the age-specific susceptibility. And I don't want to go into detail, but this is is a fact that reported in many places, but here we have a quantification of the relative susceptibility in different age groups, which is important later on when we try to design the reopening strategy. So this was done, this almost finished by the end of April. And so it was good validation from the real data. So this was started by the end of March, and we make the projection in terms of the peak and the peak size and time in the first wave. And then by the end of April, we are required to really to design the optimal reopening and recovery strategy. So that's that's a wishful thinking, because it turns out that the epidemiological modeling is not the only factors that the government considers. I'm going to be more specific here. So this is one of the optimal strategies that we recommend from the transmission models. I will go very quickly now. So this is based on the assumption the vaccine will become available in early January. Again, it was a hugely optimistic scenario. So we do have simulations in terms of when the vaccine become available in March. And it is a combination of the transmission model with the stochastic optimization that allow us to minimize the loss of activities or to maximize activities from the beginning to the end, but subject to the number of hospitalized individuals below the capacity of the province. So the capacity was decided at about level of 1,600 in the province, and the stochastic simulation based on the transmission model we identified suggests the timeline of reopening starting from May that will allow you to maintain a long period of decline. And then when you switch on to mode that allow you have almost maximal activities, then you can see a rapid increase of the cases. But this again is going to arrive at the time when vaccine, before the vaccine, after the vaccine become available. So I don't want to go into detail. So it's basic transmission model, subject to optimize the, minimize the maximize the activities during the entire course, subject to constraints. So this was done using homogeneous model, okay? But the age-specific transmission model was very important in the sense that for the homogeneous model to generate this decision tree that tell you at which time you can switch to different level of activities, we need to know what will be the up and low bound of the activities you anticipate corresponding to a particular reopening strategies that relate to, for example, if you want to first reopen the business, saying there is an upper and low bound that can be constructed from the contact mixing matrix. And the stochastic optimization procedure will allow you to pick up the appropriate level of the activities. And there's always binary decision in this decision tree. You can switch to one level, correspond to 7.55. That's correspond to Ontario stage 2 reopening actually. So this is the beginning of stage 1. That will be a high level, but allow you to stay in this stage for about 2 weeks. And then you can move and escalate your activities to a level that is really almost maximal, because the total activity, maximum activity before the pandemic is about 13. And again, you can stay in that stage for 1 month, and before you escalate even further for another month, and then you have a full-blown, in the sense that the number of individuals require hospitalization is going to exceed the hospital capacity, and then you would have to have a lockdown, or we would anticipate the vaccine will become available a few weeks before that time. All right, so this one is this. I mentioned we did that for January. We also did this for March, and part of the information we need to generate this decision tree is really the maxima and minima of the activities when you reopen the certain sectors of the economy. So this is what you would expect when you are starting from activity of full by increasing 10%, 20% of working force, and therefore will generate the increasing the contact mixing in the working place. And the other thing allow you to calculate the lower and upper bound of the activity levels from this contact mixing matrix by opening some of the recreational activities and then we open the schools. So that will be really the lower and upper bound that we use to generate the stochastic optimizations. So, which is nice. We recommended this to the Ontario government, and which was considered. It needs, they are asking us to do that again because we are facing this same issues now to reopen the economy after the second lockdown. But there's also lots of criticism, and we based our model by maximize the activities or minimize activity loss subject to the hospital beds availability. And one of the criticisms, of course, is this should be done instead of just have the contact mixing. You should really have, by age group, we should also stratify this by economic sectors. And the second issue is criticized by WHO actually. It's saying, well, the cost function of maximizing activity is not what people concern because they're concerned about the mortality. So you have to build the severity and the mortality into the cost functions. Which is true, and the same way reopening is not a science issue, it's a political issue. This is basically exactly what they say. And on that hand, observation is in Ontario, we decide to close the province or not, is decided by the hospital capacity. So there is a philosophical thinking about cost and the constraint, and there is a mathematical formulation of this, but there is also reality and different interesting groups. So we're still working on this, and I thought I want to give you a little bit kind of timeline of how mathematical modeling contribute to different policy decision making in the Ontario government and in the provincial government. I think I better quit on this, and very quickly maybe I can make a few comments about my reflection about mathematical modeling to inform decision making. I think there was a success story in terms of using mathematical model to inform decision making in the first wave, because at that time the mitigation was the public health was the focus of the mitigation. So we are modeling the economic, the epidemiological process. So that was quite good agreement between really the decision-making principle and the modeling can provide. After the first outbreak, then I think the contribution of modeling is getting less, is because really the socio-economic consideration was there, and we have not done enough. We have done something, but we have not done enough to really address the socio-economic impact of lockdown and reopening. And what is more important is throughout the whole year process, at least a interdisciplinary group from my university, including the disease management, urban study, global public health, and financial risk and insurance group, realize really there is not enough mathematics, systematic mathematics to really address this systemic risk of a pandemic. It's something that cascading, compounding, and decision to be made in the future. Your decision made currently has a long impact in the future, and the future anticipation has some impact to your decision making in the current time. This kind of now I get confused. This kind of systemic mathematical theory to understand this cascading, compounding, and anticipatory risk, I think need much attention. So I think I should stop here, and I'm very happy to take questions and save time for discussions. Give me power.
We're not very well organized. I don't see well why. I think that if somebody wants to speak in the reaction, he or she should raise hand so that I will see and give the floor to. Maybe in the meantime, I ask you a question. I was surprised by the curves of the cases that seems more a linear growth than an exponential growth. Is it consistent with the changes in behavior that occurred in the time?
Are you talking about the real curve?
The real curve. It seems more a linear growth than exponential growth, if you see that.
Yeah. Yes. So yes and no. So the epidemiological model that give you at a different stage exponential growth, and pull all them together maybe is linear, and if you are looking more of in terms of the fall, I think it might be linear more than I'm talking about this period of time.
Yes.
So in this period of time, I think there is some cheating about using our prevention model. Remember, I spoke about the difficulty of getting national model for exactly the same reason in Ontario for the fall, because the first wave. Remember, I only did this for the first wave. The first wave is more of exponential in the sense that when you're closing school in whole province, and when you close the working place, you close the working place provincial-wide. So it's down homogeneously in synchrony. But after May 19th, when we started the reopening process, then the government decided this had to be region specific. So this is really the collection of many different epidemic curves in different public health units. So I have a larger number of public health units, and different units have different intervention timelines. So like, for example, even now in Toronto, in all the remaining public health units in the province, except Toronto and the Peel region, that's the region next to Toronto and close to the airport. The two regions are still in the lockdown phase, but all the other regions have moved to different stages of reopening. So I think because of this non-homogeneous reopening timeline and the interventions that make this one, the addition of the exponential function more present in terms of linear functions. I think there's some work by, at least I know Gennard from the Georgia State, that is talking about really when you have multiple exponential growth additive multi-exponential growth, sometimes you will see more of linear growth rather than explosion growth. So I fully agree on this on the full process in the fall of last year, before the second lockdown is more linear than exponential.
Okay,
Very good. Thank you, Andrew. I really like what you observed.
I see that Federica Vanoni wants to speak, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, good afternoon. I wanted to ask, when computing the contact mixing metrics in the different phases of the pandemics, why is the workplace-related part not affected by physical distancing?
It's not impact much, because in the first phase, the intervention was launched in different phases. So in the first phase and the second phase, the workplace remain open, and there might be some reductions of like contact, but not significant reduction in terms of all the working hours and working forces. So you still have a modification of that block matrix by a certain factor, but that factor is relatively small, that reduction. So it's really the state of emergency physical distance really does not really imply much in terms of working place closure, except I mean, the individuals have started to pay attention, and the individual institutions started to pay attention, and my lab virtually was closed on March the 2nd. That's because I had two high I have two delegates, one is from the Chinese Minister of Science and Technology, another from group from Iran. That happens to be the first imported cases are coming from these two places, and so my lab is really getting nervous. So I decided to close it.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Please raise your hand. It's in the reactions if you're looking for that. Well, in the meantime, I have another question because I think it was quite interesting. So there are many things to learn. When you discussed about this very data fitting and was quite painful, which method did you use for data fitting? Which kind of criterion?
In this one, it's really the one we used and published is this square. It's the most classical one, and plus some manual adjustment. So there are multiple minima, and the team. By the way, we started this model fit into the Chinese data in January. So the group of people have experience of the ranges of parameters. So this is very painful, and we're trying to duplicate this whole process for the Toronto rather than the Ontario. That Toronto is the major city within the province, and we want to try to identify this now for Toronto, because we really want to identify the contact mixing in the school when the school are open. So because it's not in full capacity. And then we found really now the most experienced two guys are gone, and we have a new group of people. And it was very difficult to duplicate it. This whole process is using the least square. So we have been trying almost every way of parameter the parameter estimation process, and they seem to be all need to be balanced. So for the ones that we are most interested now is try to identify the contact mixing in the school. Then we have to penalize. We have to add in special way towards the school kids because we want the arrow. The arrow is small. The contribution to the arrow is always small because the number of cases is small. But we want very precise as fitting down there because we really want to understand and identify the contact mix in the school. So we have to really multiply certain factors related to the, for example, standard deviation relevant to the age groups. So there's more of a penalized least square.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Before question, maybe I can make a commercial because I mentioned we have such a good experience of benefiting from the presence of postdocs from Italy. And we are looking forward to hire more. I don't want to take away of you talented people, but if you want some people, send some people to this part of the continent, the world, please do consider our group.